Kentaro Miura was born in 1966 and went on to create one of the greatest works of fantasy ever written, Berserk. Miura made 41 volumes of collected chapters of Berserk that were serialized over time, which have gone on to be compiled in these deluxe editions by Dark Horse Comics. There are 14 of them in total that feature the chapters that are completely made by Miura himself. And in 2021, tragically, Miura died without finishing his story. Berserk was left on a serious cliffhanger and now is been picked up by his friend and another manga studio to try and carry on the story. I myself went ahead and got all 14 of these deluxe editions and read through every chapter made by Miura himself, and I'm going to be reviewing it today. These are my thoughts on Berserk. Hey guys, thanks for clicking on the video. If you're new to the channel, go ahead and hit subscribe. I talk about all kinds of different things regarding comics, pop culture, film, lots of things that I'm interested in. I myself am a writer and a comic artist. I have written 2 novels, The Price of Renewal and Wrath of Torak. Wrath of Torak is very similar to Berserk in subject matter, which you may be able to pick up on from the cover. And I also have just recently started my own manga series, Hollow Point. Now this reads left to right like an American comic, Western comic. That's because I live in America and I speak English, so I figured it would be most accessible to people if it's left to right. This is the first chapter, which is free to read on my Patreon. You can click the link in the description below to go over there and read this without a subscription. You can just read it for free. I just finished chapter 2 last night, and that is going to be available on Patreon soon for the $5 subscription, where you will be able to read every monthly release from this point on. For subscribing to the Patreon, not only do you get access to those comics for the $5 subscription, but for every subscription tier, $1 and above, you will get your name in every single YouTube video I make, as well as every issue of Hollow Point from here on out. Definitely go ahead and give this a read so you can get started on it and get ready to go before the second chapter releases very soon. And you can also get the physical copies on Amazon. Now let's get back to the video. Alright, so I want to start by explaining just how I got started with Berserk in the first place. The story goes, I got into the FromSoft games and started playing. I got through Sekiro and then got through Elden Ring, and I was so captivated by the world and the storytelling of FromSoft and Miyazaki that I thought, wow, this would be really cool in a Western setting, right? And I thought the Wild West America with all of the urban legends of cryptids and stuff like that would make the perfect setting for a FromSoft game. But I thought, well, I would just make it myself, but I'm not a game designer. I can't do that. But I could try to make a comic, and that's why I got started making Hollow Point. Although there's many similarities to Berserk, Berserk is not what directly inspired this series initially. It was actually the FromSoft games. And then I started watching videos about the behind the scenes of Dark Souls and of all those games, and I realized that Miyazaki's one of his biggest influences was the manga series Berserk. So then I had to start reading this, since I myself was wanting to make a comic series inspired by FromSoft, learning that FromSoft was inspired by Berserk. I went ahead and got the first deluxe edition of Berserk and went on a binge from then on, getting every single volume, blasting through each of these in about a week or 2 weeks, and got all the way to 14, which I just finished this morning. And my God, I have to say, this is one of the best series I have ever read. It is so good, and today I'm going to give my review on it. To get started, I would say we'll talk about the spoiler-free stuff first, and then I will do a little notice when I'm getting into spoiler territory. But I know that people who have already read through it are going to want to know my specific opinions on things that happen in the story, so we'll have that for the later part of the video. But just to start out, the artwork in this series is mind-blowing. And one of the most interesting things about it, because it went on for so long, you can actually see the artwork improve. There's like, sometimes it's a little more subtle, sometimes it's more obvious, but throughout the series you can follow and see the progress in getting better at the art as Miura wrote it. Chapter 1, right off the bat, the art is phenomenal. It looks so good, but it's dated, right? You can see that old techniques were used. You can see that it looks more similar to an old-fashioned manga style, maybe similar to Akira. And regardless, it's very captivating art. So much detail goes into every single panel, and this is true throughout the entire series. That never changes. It's just clearly so much passion was put into it. But then as you read, the art slowly gets better in different periods, right? And one of the most obvious ones being closer to these last couple chapters, where I don't know if he started using digital techniques or what exactly he did, but the lines are so much crisper, it looks so good. But overall, every single panel throughout Berserk is just filled with detail and like more backgrounds than a lot of manga series I've seen. And this is a lot of work. I know now after doing my own. There's, I've done more backgrounds than some artists have done, but that being said, when I have an example of just an individual character speaking, I often will skip doing the background on that. This one chapter of 58 pages took me a little over 2 months to make. Now, every chapter I do from here on is only 20 pages long, so I get it done a lot quicker. Also, I've become more efficient at the process. But this is a lot of work, and my backgrounds are nowhere near as detailed as Miura's are. There is one particular panel I remember when they are attacking a nation. The Band of the Hawk is attacking a nation or like a city, a palace, or you could say, or a stronghold. A fortification, right? And you see the entire castle and every little detail is in there, and it just blew my mind. I could go on about the art of this series for so long because it's so good. I mean, it's a unique look while also still being good by manga standards, right? And also good by Western standards. Like, comics have such a wide range in art styles and that, and Berserk's definitely stands out. The characters of this series, I'll talk about the characters next, and one of the most amazing things about the series is how much I get wrapped into every single character. Every character's personality is so well written, and it shines through the story, where you get absorbed and attached to all of these characters. And, the stakes are high. It's not like Star Wars or something where someone's gonna die and then just come back, right? It's, there's times where serious consequences happen, and you will feel it when the characters you have become so invested in, maybe something will happen to them. And again, I need to avoid the spoilers for this first part, but there's definitely enough of that in the series. The characters are so well written. Some particular standouts I think of are obviously Guts. I would say a character by the name of Judo is a very well written character. Casca as well. Isidro is a pretty entertaining character. And that's one of the most amazing things. There's some characters in this story who initially I could not stand them. For example, at the very beginning of the series, Guts has this little elf that follows him around, Puck. Without getting too heavy into spoilers, I will just say Puck hangs around, right? That's a lasting character in the series. There's a period where he's not present for a while. And specifically, that's because we start the series in one point in time, and then we go back in time, and there's a long period of the back in time until it leads up to where we left off, which is a very cool way to do this story. It gets the readers absorbed immediately in the current state of things, and then you see how it got there through a very, very long portion of the series until it eventually catches back up to where we left off. Basically, you go back to Guts' backstory and see from when he was a young child, even it shows a little bit about him being born, all the way up until the point where we started. And then we go on from there, which is very cool. But anyway, this character Puck initially was the most annoying thing to me. I thought, this is such a serious, dark series. And then you have this goofy elf running around acting like a fool. And I couldn't stand him at first. But by the end of the series, I have come to really appreciate Puck and the little bits of comedic relief that he puts into the series. Another character like that is Isidro. I could not stand Isidro at first. I thought he was a little cool and interesting, but I thought, it's just another Puck. And Isidro and Puck end up being sort of a tag team, right? So that drove me nuts until I eventually started to appreciate it, and I really kind of looked forward to their little comedic relief bits. There's one in particular panel where it's a reference to Star Wars, and you have a Puck being like a little bit of a dark mastermind like the Emperor in Star Wars, with Isidro being the apprentice, and it's pretty funny. I apologize if you guys hear any noise. I live next to a school, and it seems that the kids are on recess all day long screaming. So that's what that is. Next, I'm going to get into the actual storytelling. This story is brilliant, and it seems very clear that Miura had a very well thought out outline for this story before writing. Now, it's possible that that's not the way it started, but then as he was writing, he thought, I better get this all figured out. And then writes the rest, because the story, for the most part, is so consistent. It tells the same story through without feeling like we're getting side-railed. There is one point where I feel like it got derailed a little bit, and I was like, what's the point of this? Like, we could just move on to the important part. Basically, it's a section that really was not important at all. We'll get into that when I move into the spoiler territory, but overall, yes, the storytelling is just phenomenal. It doesn't feel rushed. It doesn't feel thrown together. It feels like a very intentional decisions were made when writing this story. But with that being said, there's not too much I can say about the story without getting into spoilers. If you're someone who doesn't know anything about Berserk and you want a little bit of an idea of what it's about before reading it, I can say we start with this character Guts, who is a brooding, intimidating type of character, very muscular. He's got scars and things all over him. He's got a metal arm, so he's clearly missing an arm, and a giant sword. And he's going around hunting down these sort of monster things, right, which are called the Apostles. And then we get the backstory of Guts to understand why he's doing that. Ultimately, I would say the theme of the story has to do with fate, right? Or is your destiny up to your own choice and your own decisions, or are you just on the path of fate, right? That's sort of the theme of the story. And Guts, I don't think this is a huge spoiler, but he's a character that very much wants to take matters into his own hands and not rely on fate. Alright, so lots of characters we meet throughout the way. There's periods of time where Guts is very alone, and there's periods of time where he has a whole group of companions. So that's about what I'll say without spoiling too much, other than that the FromSoft games were very inspired by this series. So that might give you some clues into what the overall vibe and aesthetic feel like. It is definitely dark fantasy. Now, that being said, there is a point where the series starts to feel less like dark fantasy and more like just normal fairy tale storytelling, which initially I thought was a little jarring, but eventually I came to appreciate it, and especially the dichotomy of how the series begins to that point. So anyway, from this point on, I'm going to be talking about spoilers. I'm going to get into specifics about the story. So if you have not read it yet and you want to read it and don't want it spoiled, click off the video now. Go check out one of my other videos. I've got a review of the new Frankenstein movie you can go watch, which was really good. Or you can click my Patreon link below to go get started reading Hollow Point. There's only one chapter of this, so it's not going to take you long. The second one's about to be out, but it's not going to take you long to read, which means you can get through it real quick and then get started reading Berserk. Alright, so here we go with the spoilers. My overall thoughts about the specifics of the story. For one, to start out, Guts is awesome. I have never felt so inspired by a character. I mean, I think of like Naruto, for example, and I connected with Naruto a lot as a kid. I felt I related to Naruto, the character, because he was an underdog that everyone, I mean, not really an underdog because he obviously has this great power within him, but everyone doubted him all the time, and he worked very hard to succeed regardless of those doubts, and I felt like I related to that. Guts in Berserk is a little bit of a different story. He's, we start by seeing him as this very powerful character. People are not doubting him initially. It's like, oh, he walks into the room and this guy means business, right? But we eventually, of course, learned the backstory of Guts, and it wasn't always that way, He was a small kid. He had to grow. He had to go through life and grow just like the rest of us. But the difference is that Guts never takes no for an answer. He never allows his situation and the things that happen to him to stop him from succeeding or from doing what he's gonna do. We see him go after this apostle at the beginning, and the Black Swordsman arc I liked. It was good enough that I wanted to read through the story. I thought this is really cool, and the Black Swordsman arc in particular is the arc that I would say feels the most like a FromSoft game. I liked it a lot, but at that point, I wasn't like, oh, this is one of the best stories I've ever read, but it was good. And then he goes after the one apostle, the Baron. I don't know what he's called. The Baron, maybe, the slug guy or whatever. Kills that one, gets the Behelit, and then we get the backstory eventually after we're introduced to Griffith and the God Hand. And the backstory is where I started to fall in love with this story. We get a little bit about where Guts came from, his birth, which was interesting right off the bat. He's born under this tree with dead bodies everywhere, like born under the dead body of his mother. And that was compelling because you see this brooding, scary character at the beginning, and then you learn this about how he came to be. And you think, oh, something's weird here. And even the other characters who witnessed it thought, oh, this is like a bad omen, right? Guts, of course, gets taken in by this mercenary band he gets taken in by Gambino, who goes on to basically act as Guts' father figure, but not a very good one. That being said, Guts learned what it means to persevere and pull through situations through that experience of being in this little mercenary group and from Gambino. Even though Gambino was a terrible father figure, he did teach Guts the pull yourself up by your bootstraps sort of mentality. Guts then goes on to eventually, he kills Gambino, if I'm remembering correctly, because Gambino sold him to a guy to do bad things to him. And this is my main criticism of Berserk. The very dark and gratuitous sexual violence, which obviously is a very important part of the story, the way it's depicted visually is disturbing to me. It's like the characters are sexualized and drawn in this very sexual, voluptuous way while they're having these disturbing, awful things happen to them. And that it's not just the grown adult women that Miura does this with. It's also Guts himself as a young child being taken advantage of by a grown man. And that was a disturbing, that one was drawn in a little more disturbing way, yet still we're getting this weird visual of this young boy, and it just felt weird. I think he could have made it clear what was happening without depicting it that way. Of course, later in the series we have similar things happening with these adult women, and Miura does not hold back in the sexualization of how he draws them. Like, you could draw these bad things happening without doing it like that. Or you could also just get the point across without showing that much stuff in the first place, right? But there is something about this that maybe is important, and it's that it sort of shows the grotesqueness of humans, right? Like, I would not be surprised if people are reading this and they see some of these panels, and because of the way Miura has drawn some of these characters, like Casca, for example, in this very sexual, hentai-looking way, I'm sure a lot of readers see that and think, oh, attractive, right? Until they realize what's happening. Their brain fully processes it, and it's repulsive. And maybe the drawing it that way makes it even more repulsive to see, because this is this beautiful woman that's having something horrible happen to her. And I don't know, maybe that's what he was thinking, or maybe he was just trying to sell comics, trying to get like a bunch of gooners to read the comic. I'm not entirely sure what the deal was. I'm sure it didn't hurt the comic sales, but that's my main criticism. I think that should have been depicted a little bit differently. But that being said, the story's great. So Guts, then we go through his early childhood where he's working as a mercenary, even as a young boy, and he is successful. He takes out grown enemies and all this stuff, eventually leading to the Band of the Hawk, led by Griffith. Now, Guts at this point is very standoffish, which you can understand based on his childhood. He was sold by his father figure, who was a cold-hearted father figure to begin with, to this grown man to do these disturbing things to him. You would understand why Guts doesn't trust people, and he does not want people to touch him. He's keeps his distance. He doesn't like to get close with people. But as he joins the Band of the Hawk after losing in a fight to Griffith, and essentially the deal was that he's Griffith's now. Griffith can do with him as he pleases. And what Griffith pleases at that point in time is for Guts to be in the Band of the Hawk as a mercenary. We go through all these adventures of the Band of the Hawk as they're working throughout Midland as mercenaries. They are eventually, succeeding in this fight here and this war here and all this stuff, the 100 Years' War, and they rise to fame to the point where Midland makes them basically Midland's army. Like, they're no longer a mercenary band anymore. They are like the great knights of Midland. And they're royalty now. They're seen as these nobles and all this. And throughout this whole period, Guts is slowly building connections and friendships to these companions, the Band of the Hawk. And it's written in such a way that us as the reader feels a connection to these characters as well. Judo, Casca, Pippin, Rickert. And throughout this whole time, we can sort of tell, even though Griffith seems like a really good guy, this great charismatic leader, everyone loves him and looks up to him, you can sort of tell, especially through his individual dialogue with Guts here and there, that Griffith is willing to do whatever he needs to do to get what he wants. Now, Griffith this whole time is carrying one of these behelits, these red egg things, that a lot of the story at this point is the Band of the Hawk fighting humans, and then General Zod comes in, or Nosferatu Zod, and this is an apostle who is not just a little bit of a deformed human who is very strong, but also turns into this big beast who looks just like the Taurus demon from Dark Souls 1. The Taurus demon was definitely based on Zod. This is when the story starts to get a little wild, and we learn that there might be a little bit of something going on with the Behelit. Zod warns Guts that if he follows this man around with that Behelit, that bad things will happen. And eventually, once the Band of the Hawk rises to this level of fame, Griffith plots to end the royalty of Midland and basically usurp the throne. But, of course, Guts goes and does the assassinations and stuff for him. But something happens, and the plan fails. And Griffith is caught, and beaten, and tortured. And the Band of the Hawk is trying to move on without him. And they end up eventually going and rescuing him a year later. Now, the problem with this is that before the failure happened, Guts left the Band of the Hawk. He decided he was going to go out on his own and not live under Griffith's shadow. He wanted to do things for himself. And that's when Griffith gets caught. Guts feels guilt, right? Because maybe if he hadn't left, Griffith would not have failed. Guts comes back, and the Band of the Hawk then goes to try and rescue Griffith, and they find him in this disturbing state after being tortured and all this. He's emaciated and small, and his tongue's been ripped out and all this stuff. He looks like he will never recover from this and never be the Griffith that they once knew. And they're being chased by some more apostles that are sent by the King of Midland to go and capture Griffith again. Of course, Griffith, prior to this, had developed this relationship with Princess Charlotte of Midland, and she had her own weird story with her father, the king, who was trying to do disturbing things to her, but she saw safety and security in Griffith, and Griffith basically promised to her that they were going to be married and all this. Of course, he wants to do that for his own purposes and to gain power and things like that. But anyway, they're escaping, and Griffith cannot escape fate. Something happens to him. He gets stabbed in the neck by a branch, just basically showing that destiny is prevailing regardless. And there's a lot of things I'm not talking about. This is a long story. There's this tension between Griffith and Casca where they sort of have feelings for each other, but then Guts comes in, and then Casca, who didn't really like Guts at first, comes around after Guts saves her a couple times, and they develop feelings, and then there's this tension between Guts and Griffith, and if I was talking about everything about this story, this would be the longest video ever. It goes on forever. But of course, we get to the eclipse. Griffith, the Behelit triggers after Griffith is stabbed in the neck and all this, and then the eclipse happens, the demons come, and all of these characters that we have grown to love throughout reading this story are viciously and brutally slaughtered in front of us and in front of Guts and Casca. And Casca, the things that happen to her are so disturbing. All of these demons are grabbing her and taking advantage of her in disturbing ways, and Griffith comes down to do the same. Now, Griffith, at this point during the eclipse, all of these people, the Band of the Hawk, have been branded with the brand of sacrifice, and Griffith is basically letting them die. Like, they are sacrifices for him so he can become a member of the God Hand. And this is the brilliance of the story, right? It's so good how we were taken through this whole long story to connect and feel close with these characters, just for them to be ripped away in front of us and in front of Guts. And then Guts is forced to watch this happen to Casca, who he has come to love. This terrible stuff that Griffith does as well. I don't know what I can say without getting demonetized, but if you've read it, if you're watching the spoiler portion of this video, you know what happens. Guts has to watch it, and this sends Guts into a mad rage of vengeance, where he goes fighting and slaughtering. He gets his arm ripped off and all this stuff, loses an eye, which leads to how we saw him at the beginning of the story. And then they are saved by this mysterious Skull Knight. He saves Guts and Casca. However, we soon learn that Casca is not the same. The trauma was so severe that she does not even have a recollection of who she was. She's just a babbling idiot walking around, which is understandable after what happened to her. She locked away her old self to try and shield herself from those memories. Guts tries to protect Casca, but his apostle hunting, because after the eclipse he wants to get vengeance on Griffith, and he's going out hunting down these apostles, basically trying to get to Griffith. But with Casca there now, it becomes very difficult. That eventually happens. Casca escapes. Rickert survived this whole thing. He was not present for the eclipse, and so Casca is kept with Rickert and this blacksmith to keep her safe. But Guts, after Casca gets away and escapes, now meanwhile, Casca keeps seeing this baby, this deformed monstrosity of a baby who keeps showing up. And, because of the brand of sacrifice, when Casca and Guts are out at nighttime, these evil spirits and things show up going after them, but the baby shows up too. Casca, though, escapes, runs off, and then Guts has to go and track her down. This is the point where Puck comes back into the story, where Guts is without Casca, and he's, going around, and now Puck is with him because we're back to where we left off at the beginning. And eventually, even though Guts did not like Puck at first, he comes around to liking Puck because Puck does a lot for him. He helps him out. Also, he adds comedic relief to the story, which some could argue was a little needed at some points. But Guts goes on these adventures, hunting down apostles and things like this, but eventually goes to find Casca, who has ended up at this place and taken in by these basically prostitutes who take care of her, while the Holy See, the Holy Iron Chain Knights, which is basically like the Catholic Church's army, you could say, are hunting down heretics and witches, and they all think Casca's a witch because these crazy things happen. But Guts eventually gets Casca, saves her, and then it's hard for him to go on alone without Casca, or with Casca with him now. So he then is going around and trying to do the same thing, but he has to worry about her, and this makes it so that Guts no longer can afford to be traveling alone. He actually needs the help of others. And he, of course, picks up these people along the way. Farnese, who was the commander of the Holy Iron Chain Knights, not a fit commander. She was basically like a figurehead. But these things happen, and her little servant boy end up joining Guts, and they didn't really want to willingly at first, but eventually they come to appreciate him and all this. And Farnese is very instrumental in helping with Casca. There's so much to this story. I mean, I can't talk about every single thing. I can't summarize the whole thing in one go. But they're looking, he picks up these other people along the way, right? Isidro and Shirky. Oh, there's so much. Griffith comes back in the form of the previous Griffith that we once knew, but even more radiant and amazing than before. And there's this apostle who wants to be this demon king, and he's the leader of the Kushan, which is this other nation from the east, and he does these rituals and stuff basically to turn himself into this big beast and all this. And Griffith leads the army of Midland because when he comes back, he does all this stuff and performs these miracles and has these apostles like Zod following him around, and then rises up to be the hero he once was in Midland and takes out this Kushan emperor, this demon king, which creates this tree, this glowing tree, which obviously the Erd tree in Elden Ring is based on this, the world tree and all this. But all this is happening, and Griffith is now becoming basically a hero in Midland again, and they almost see him as a god, as like a Jesus sort of figure. And Guts, meanwhile, is just trying to get Casca's memories back because he's heard that there's this elf island where allegedly they could maybe restore Casca's memories. So they head out to the elf island and all this stuff, and Casca's memories, of course, get restored, but she can't face Guts because he's a reminder of all the trauma, even though she wants to see him because she loves him. And then we have this baby, which we then come to find out is Griffith's baby. There's too much. I can't explain it all in one video. This would go on forever. But if you read it, you know it happened. Now, my criticism of one of these things is I do feel like a section is unnecessary. And that's when they go to this island when they're sailing, and there's the sea god, and they have to fight the sea god and all this stuff. And I guess you could say it does a lot for Guts with the armor, the Berserker armor, and Shirky and all this, but it felt like a side story, like a monster of the week sort of thing. But right after that, we get to the Elf Island, and then all this happens, and very sadly, as soon as things were starting to be explained and the story was finally starting to come together, and we learn that the baby, that the child that keeps showing up is Casca and Griffith's baby, I guess is what it was getting at. Casca's memories are restored. We learn who the Skull Knight is, this previous king, who was also one of the branded as well. And then Miura died. And that's where it left off. And I have not, I don't have the new chapters, which are done by his friend and all that. This is what I've read, the Miura chapters. So that's what I have for now. And in the future, after I read those other chapters, I will make another video talking about that. But I'll probably wait a while. I have a lot of other things I want to read, and I'll probably wait for the series to be finished before I jump back into it. But man, what a place for the writer to die. It was terrible. It's like things were finally starting to come together, and then we get stuck on that. And for those of you who were reading it as it was coming out, I know you had quite a period of time where you had to wait for the new chapters to start happening. But all in all, this is one of the best series I have ever read, and I can't wait to get to the new stuff and to see it completed. It'll never be the same without Miura making it, but you know, I haven't read the new chapters yet, so maybe I'll really love them. But Berserk by far is one of the best, and if you guys enjoy Berserk, hit the like button. Let me know in the comments like your thoughts on some of this stuff. I really, you know, for the most part, loved everything about the series except for my one criticism that I talked about. So if you disagree with any of that, let me know in the comments. Let me know some other series that you think are really good, maybe comparable to Berserk, that you think I should read and talk about. And hit the subscribe button because I'm going to be making more videos talking about comics. I plan to talk about this comic here soon. It's called Descender. We'll get to that one in the future. But head on over to my Patreon so you can read Chapter 1 of Hollow Point if you're looking for a new comic or manga series to read. This one just started, so you can follow along as the comics come out every month. And I'll see you guys in the next video.
Spoilers ahead! Spoilers ahead! Spoilers ahead!